Hi, and welcome to Conversations with B'nai B'rith. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Today, we're sharing how one student's curiosity, guided by a meaningful academic partnership, brought new life to a Holocaust story and a family history nearly lost to time. In Jewish tradition, remembering names is one of the most sacred acts, and this project honors that tradition. The project began when Leah Davenport, then a student at the College of Charleston, was asked to study a set of letters exchanged between Malie Landsmann in Berlin and Minnie Baum in South Carolina. The messages, urgent, heartbreaking pleas for help, revealed a failed rescue effort and a story that came perilously close to being forgotten. Davenport didn't stop at the assignment. She wrote articles, developed educational materials, and ultimately placed Stolpersteine, or stumbling stones, for the Landsmann family outside their last known residence in Berlin on March 9th, 2025. So what began as academic research became a personal act of remembrance, honoring a family whose story might otherwise never be told. A 2025 graduate of the College of Charleston, Leah earned degrees in Jewish Studies and Women's and Gender Studies. She worked as a research assistant at the Pearlstine Lipov Center for Southern Jewish Culture, contributing to statewide synagogue documentation and mentoring first-year Jewish Studies students. She's joined today by her advisor, Professor Chad Gibbs, director of the Zucker-Goldberg Center for Holocaust Studies and assistant professor of Jewish Studies at the College of Charleston. A historian of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, and war in society, Professor Gibbs focuses on the timing, choices, and tactics of Jewish resistance. His work draws heavily on oral history and survivor testimony, both inside and outside the classroom. In that area, he's an affiliated researcher at the USC Shoah Foundation and the Center for Advanced Genocide Research at USC Dornsife. Together, their work reminds us that Holocaust memory endures not only in museums and textbooks or archives. It depends on our active, deliberate choice to remember. But before we get into today's conversation, a quick reminder: if you enjoy this program, subscribe to Conversations with B'nai B'rith wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook to stay updated with all of our latest content. Leah, Professor Gibbs, welcome to the program. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Gibbs, let's start the conversation with you. Give us a bit of context here. When was the Zucker-Goldberg Center for Holocaust Studies founded, and what inspired its creation at the College of Charleston?
Oh, that's a great story to tell. The Zucker-Goldberg Center was founded, it's going back some time now. It's nearly 20 years. I've only been here since 2021. I got my PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in that year and was lucky enough to get this position here right out of my studies. So I came here and took this position then. It's had a couple of directors before me, but the guiding principle, the guiding light behind this program is Anita Zucker and her family, and their interest in forwarding Holocaust education and keeping the memory of those murdered by the Nazis from 1933 to 1945. Anita and her husband, the late Jerry Zucker, both have family relations who were killed in the Holocaust and are descendants of survivors themselves. So this was a mission near and dear to their heart, and their contributions made the center and the position that I have here possible.
Leah, turning to you now, how did you first become involved in Jewish studies at the College of Charleston, and what made you want to continue deeper into this kind of research, that is, to work and learn about the victims of the Holocaust?
So I initially started in high school as a member of the Charleston Jewish Federation's Remember Project, which is focused on bringing Holocaust education materials to your high school. And so when I got to college, I live relatively close to Charleston, and so it was sort of a logical progression in joining Jewish studies and trying to find a space where there was Holocaust education there on campus. And there already was one, but it wasn't really active. And so I met with Dr. Gibbs my first semester, my freshman year. And he was like, well, actually, there are no students who are doing this. It's gone inactive, but like check out my classes next semester. And so I took his history of anti-Semitism and slowly got more and more involved in Jewish studies. And that's how I got my position as a research assistant at the Pearlstine Lipov Center. And then became very sort of enmeshed with Jewish studies and didn't really ever leave.
Professor Gibbs, you talked a little about the founding of the center. What sparked your personal interest in Holocaust history, particularly Jewish resistance and oral history? And what areas have really shaped your work, whether it's research or teaching or both?
Sure. My story is, I think, like many people, a family member who got them interested in history. I don't come from a Jewish background. I'm not Jewish myself. My grandfather, who got me interested in Holocaust and World War II history, is the younger brother of several World War II veterans, and he read heavily about World War II, I think, out of reverence for what they had done, and some degree it would occasionally be expressed of like a kind of survivor's guilt for not having to go to World War II as that younger son. So some of that reading and mentorship from him put me on the path of being interested in history in the Second World War and military service. And I was in the Army for about 10 years, medically retired from the Army after getting wounded in combat in Iraq, and looking for a new path. I went to college, and the long story short version of that is I thought I would end up being a high school history teacher and be very happy with that career, but met a professor named David Messenger, who's now at the University of South Alabama. He was at the University of Wyoming when I was a student, and I went on a study abroad trip in 2011 with him, where on my birthday, just out of happenstance, we were at Treblinka and studying what had happened there and seeing the memorial, and my writing and my research is on Treblinka. The book that I will have out next year is about Treblinka, about resistance at that place. I don't know, I went there, and I've never stopped thinking of that place and those people since. So,
well, Leah, this project started with a stack of letters. Where did you first come across the letters? And what was it like reading those messages between Malie Landsmann and Minnie Baum? What went through your mind as you were going through these letters?
Yeah, so I didn't have the physical copies. I had just like a Dropbox of scanned images, but there wasn't really much of a decision behind choosing their letters. I was given two options, and this one sort of had no ending to it. It was just sort of you get the last letter and that was it. The other set had a survivor who was able to tell his story, and so it was sort of an obvious decision of who to go with. And it was over winter break. I was reading these like at my parents' house, and I was just sort of thinking like it's really surreal to read someone's exact experiences. Like you learn about these things, but you don't necessarily hear what it was like for them, what they were going through, what their thoughts were. And I remember reading the last letter or getting to the last letter and thinking, this is like kind of a late letter to be receiving. It was June 1941. And it wasn't translated. And it just sort of seemed like really important. And when it was finally translated, it was basically saying, like, you've forgotten about us. What have we done to deserve this? And it's hard to explain what it's like reading those when you know the ending.
Yeah, well, I can identify with it, and we talked a little bit before we started the program. My mother was the correspondent with our family in Lithuania. My mother was born in Lithuania, and she was in constant touch with her cousins. And she always told me when I was a young boy that as the end drew near, which would have been around the same time that you're talking about these letters, which would be somewhere in late 1940, early 1941, the relatives wrote and said, please try to bring us over. How can we get out? And there were so many American Jews who didn't know where to turn, didn't know how to even start the process. The war had started. They really didn't know anybody that had connections and no member of Congress. And today we know kind of the steps how to do these things. And, it bothered my mother until her last days that she wasn't able to really help. Now, these letters that you went through, were they already housed? You said they were scanned. They were housed at the Zucker Goldberg Center's archive. And does this specific collection include more than just the Landsmann family's correspondence? Professor Gibbs, why don't you start?
Sure. These are all in what we call Addlestone Library Special Collections here at College of Charleston, which has a surprising, locally connected, strong archive in Holocaust studies. They're a collection of their own, kind of coming from that family provenance, so they're not mixed in with many, many other things. It's very much about the stories of these people. And you have in that collection kind of the whole run of the letters, some documentation of what Minnie Baum is attempting to do for her relatives who are caught in Europe, as we know. And the collection kind of, as Leah alluded to, it lacks a conclusion of its own. Maybe I think I can end here on this question with this kind of highlighting that Leah, the work that she did is largely what brings us kind of to a conclusion here. The family may never have known what the unfortunate conclusion was, but Leah was able to find that in the process of getting these Stolpersteine.
So the Baum family was here in the United States. And where did they live?
Minnie Baum, she lived in a little town called Camden, South Carolina, which is near the capital, Columbia, South Carolina. So she was in a very small Jewish community in that town. She had been there for some time. I believe that Leah can maybe correct me if I flub this, but I think that she had moved down here from New York, I believe. There's a local newspaper that used to do kind of filler Sunday stories on individuals who are like in an old folks home, and Minnie Baum did one of these and sort of talked about her interesting path to Camden, South Carolina.
Leah, how many letters actually total did you look through?
It's just over a dozen, I want to say. It's between 12 and 24 for sure. And only maybe half of those, 3/4 of those were probably translated into English.
Mm-hmm. Just going back to what I was saying before, looking at the content of the letters, many of which were desperate pleas for help. What did they show you about how the U.S. had responded or failed to respond to the growing danger facing German Jews in the 1930s? Professor Gibbs?
Sure. So these letters give us such a window into kind of a world that we forgot while the conversation was about what did Americans know and what did governments know. And these letters, and these aren't the only ones that I've worked with. I want to give some credit to my PhD advisors, a man named Dr. Amos Bitzon. First kind of opened my eyes to how much letters could help teaching about the Holocaust. We worked with a collection of postcards sent from a woman named Sarah Spira to her relatives in Racine, Wisconsin. And those letters do such amazing work in showing American students here in the 21st century how close the Holocaust was to people they can actually see themselves in the shoes of. So Wisconsinites were able to imagine being from Racine a lot easier than they could imagine the Warsaw Ghetto, for example. And students from Camden, South Carolina, there are very few of those, but students from South Carolina in general can kind of imagine how much closer this world is by seeing that letters were sent directly there to towns they know about and people that they can see themselves in. So I just think these letters do so much work in what we'd call like localizing Holocaust history, bringing it down to a level that we rarely think about. We have this larger conversation about what did governments know, but Jewish communities knew a great deal as well. Governments knew a lot more than we've long spoken about. I think we're kind of redressing that history at this point. But alongside that, we should also kind of be putting in the narrative of what everyday people know. That was a larger story than many have focused on.
Yeah, Leah, what pushed you to take this project beyond the classroom? You could have just read the letters, done your paper, but you went beyond that to actually initiate the Stolpersteine installation. I mean, this is very impressive. Tell us about that. You decided to take it much further.
It was sort of just the feeling of like, I can't be the only person to know these details, to remember this about them. I mean, for so long, their lives were just sitting in special collections, waiting. And it didn't feel right to just let that happen again. Like, yes, there's an article, but that's not necessarily all that they should get. Yeah.
Professor Gibbs, I'm curious, as Leah's advisor, how did you support and guide her through a project with this kind of emotional and historical weight? I mean, you just said localizing. Now we're talking about a family that's right there in South Carolina. What was it like watching her take it so far?
Inspiring, for one, and just amazing. I get to sing Leah's praises a bit here. You don't need to. Leah might have to prepare me more than I have to prepare Leah pretty often. So, is she going to go down this road, finish these Stolpersteine on her own? There are very few times I have to get involved in that process or things that I need to do. I put her in touch with a translator. My friend Matthew Green translated that last letter that had never been translated. But it was basically Leah checking in at her own pace, on her own time, with her own motivation, and knowing, I get to be very proud and say, knowing that I didn't have to do very much on this, and that was clear from the beginning. I spoke a lot about Stolpersteine. I love this memorial project, the over 100,000 stones that are now spread all across Europe, the world's largest diffused monument to any event, certainly the largest Holocaust monument, if you put it in those terms. But as to what happens, we spoke a little bit about what are the first steps, what do you do, how do you contact people for how to put in Stolpersteine. And then it was very much Leah off to the races and accomplishing this mostly unaided. And I'm coming back into it at the point where she has impressed a German bureaucrat so much that a possibly 3-year-long process becomes 8 months long, and us going to Berlin to see the unveiling of these stones in spring break of last semester. So I would reiterate, I get to sit at the end of this just very much the proud teacher and say that I didn't have to do very much in this at all.
I first saw Stolpersteine in Hamburg. I was there on a visit, and I think for the benefit of our viewers, so these are small stones, plates with a plate on them, indicating that at this particular address, in this particular house, that's where the X family lived, the Y family lived, and it's and you can't it's not something that you can miss. It's right there. You're walking and you see this, and it causes you to stop and take a look. And it's really very profound, very small but very profound in terms of the impact of personalizing. Again, Professor Gibbs talked about localizing here. We're personalizing these many stories. You traveled with Leah and other students as part of the study abroad program. How did that experience, visiting Holocaust sites and seeing memorials like the Stolpersteine, shape the way that you approach teaching history?
I think the most important way it can shape the way that I teach history and the way others teach history is to remember the people and speak less about gigantic numbers and huge faceless events. On this most recent, the one we just did this summer, version of our study abroad about the Holocaust, we assigned each student, very much inspired by what Leah had recently accomplished. We assigned each student a Stolpersteine, one stumbling stone. Go find your stumbling stone, go take photographs of it, learn about the neighborhood that it's in, learn about what happened to that person, and then represent that person to us along the path of our trip. I think many of your listeners will have been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., where the moment you go in, you're handed like a representation of a passport that has like one Holocaust survivor or victim, or all of them are victims, but either someone who survived or was murdered in the Holocaust. And you could flip through it right then, but many people kind of wait until the end, and then they've observed the museum, and then they look at their person, and they kind of, maybe they think back of where in this museum would my person's story have been told. And we were trying to do something like that with assigning each student a stone. Okay, we're going to these places. We're going to Panerai or Panari, where the people of Vilna were murdered. We're going to Auschwitz. Like, there were individuals on our list of Stolpersteine who had been put through each of these things. And a student would be, waking up to go on our next day of the study abroad and maybe realize, oh, this is my person. The history that we're doing today is a human being who I can put a name and a face with. And then that student would represent that name and the face to our class as they spoke about the stone and the person they'd been assigned.
So, Leah, after seeing Stolpersteine across Europe during that trip, what was it like to stand at 17 Hirtenstrasse and witness the installation for the Landsmann family, knowing that you helped to make it happen?
It was a great relief knowing that we were there, and there were also complete strangers who showed up that morning. There was Klaus, who lives in the building, who was there from beginning to end. He spent probably about 30 minutes longer than he needed to be there to just sort of talk with people, asking questions. He told us that the building is actually from the 1860s. It's the original building. And he even invited us in. He said, you can look to see if there are traces of Jewish life in the building. I don't think there are, but you're more than welcome to look. There were people there was one lady who works at NYU Berlin who showed up, and she, I guess, does volunteer work with the Berlin sort of sector of the organization. And she was working to put in stones for W. Michael Blumenthal, who lived just down the street and was around the same age as Malie Landsmann's oldest daughter, Ida. And it was really amazing to get to talk to people about the Landsmanns and about just sort of the process overall, and getting to welcome the Landsmanns back to a city that they saw their future in.
Professor Gibbs, as a historian and as an academic, what was that moment like for you, seeing this journey come full circle in such a powerful way? It wasn't in the classroom. It was right there at the place. Tell us about that.
It's a memory of a lifetime, entirely. To be able to go to 17 Hirtenstrasse in a neighborhood of Berlin that I had been to. Berlin is one of my favorite cities in the world, for all of its good and bad. That city can teach us so much. And I've been in that neighborhood. It's near the Volksbühne, the People's Theater. That's rather popular. People will know of that location. It's not far from Alexanderplatz. It's just such an important place, and to see, most importantly, the Landsmann family's names return to their city, as Leah has said, and has said in her writing. And to see that is just inspiring and touching. And then to know that, it's not the most important part of that thing, but every time I see those stones, I'll know that one of my students put them there. And that will memorialize this differently for me and for Leah and for others who know that part of this history, which will, it will go away with us, but the Landsmanns will hopefully always be there back where they should have been.
Switching gears a bit now, Professor Gibbs, you told us you have a book coming out about resistance at Treblinka. What are some of the other courses that you teach at the college?
So I have and thanks to the people who've made my center and my chair possible, I have a pretty focused role. I teach our courses on Holocaust history every fall. I teach a course about anti-Semitism, Second World War, and racism worldwide, sort of widening the lens away from the Holocaust, but with that as its core. And I teach about women in the Holocaust in an honors offering that is coming up this fall as well. So I have a pretty narrow but focused, important role here in those kind of harder topics, those darker corners of Jewish and world history. So I'm really glad to have that and to have that luxury of being able to focus in on those really important topics without trying also at the same time, as many professors must do, to teach a survey class that I may not be all that well prepared to actually lead. So,
Leah, you've also co-hosted a podcast on this topic. How is that connected with your studies, your research, and the stories that you've been telling about your work?
Yeah, so it's more of a focus on lesser known stories of survival, resistance, that sort of thing. We've done an episode on a town called Kalishin in Poland, which Dr. Gibbs and I have done a lot of research on with Dr. Ashley Walters of the Pearlstine Lipov Center. We actually visited there this summer on study abroad. We've done an episode on queer Holocaust history. It's just sort of bringing awareness to stories that aren't talked about, and not letting it be forgotten to history.
Professor Gibbs, have you noticed more students wanting to explore Holocaust research in recent years? Does it feel like there's a growing interest?
It does here. I think that these things are also pretty local. So across the United States, I'm sure that various professors would have different answers to that question. But here at the College of Charleston, it's very strong, and I would say strengthening. And not just to be the professor that wants to give credit to the students all the time. That is part, through how our students like Leah have built their own programs for these things and led their peers into those classes. So I have classes at College of Charleston are supposed to be rather small. We're a smaller school, so I have 40 students in 2 different sections, so 80 students going into a class on the Holocaust this fall. That's as large as a class here generally gets. These things always fill, and interest does seem to be rising. I think that, there are warning signs for a million different things going on right now as it regards anti-Semitism, as it regards the sort of forced controversies of academia. But here we seem to be weathering or even rising at the time when others might be having some different problems.
Hearing you say this, it almost makes me want to return to campus to resume my studies and to have an opportunity to do the kinds of things that Leah has done. Leah, congratulations, first of all, on graduating the College of Charleston.
Thank you.
Now that you've graduated, what's next for you? Do you see yourself staying connected to this kind of work, at least in some way?
I wish. I will be going to Boston College in the fall, where I'll be earning my Master's of Social Work.
Wow. And do you see, I can't imagine that, even though you'll be in social work studies, that having gone through this process, again, personalizing these families, that you won't be far from issues relating to Holocaust remembrance, research, and education. Would you say that that's a fair bet?
Definitely. I think so. Holocaust history, you have to take in mind that social work is it's a fairly new sort of career, but it has been instrumentalized in ways that, it's got very bad history in certain areas, in certain places. And so it definitely won't be far from my mind, the Holocaust.
Well, looking back on this project, final question. What do you hope people will take away from the Landsmann story? Whether they see the Stolpersteine in Berlin or hear about it through your work, what has this project taught you?
I think that there's always remembering to be done. It's never a done deal. And that if you want to play a role in memory and remembrance, that it's easier said than done. But it's not a difficult thing to do at all.
Well, it's a good point. It's a good closing point, because the further we get away from the Holocaust, and now we're 80 years beyond 1945, of course, the number of survivors continues to diminish, and rapidly, unfortunately, because of just the biological clocks. And so memory becomes so much more important, and it becomes even more important when someone from your generation takes up this need to remember, and we're certainly deeply appreciative. The care that both of you have had for the Landsmann's memory it's just incredibly moving. We can only hope that more families lost in the Holocaust are given the same dignity through efforts like yours. Well, you can read more about this profound story by heading to the today.charleston.edu link in the video description. Leah, Professor Gibbs, thank you both for being with us today and for the beautiful mitzvah of making sure that the Landsmann family is now memorialized in front of their former Berlin home. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Conversations with B'nai B'rith. Thank you to Leah Davenport and Professor Chad Gibbs for sharing the story behind the Landsmann Stolpersteine project and helping ensure the memory of one family perished in the Holocaust is never forgotten. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Share this episode with others. Post about it on social media, or leave us a comment or a rating. To stay updated, follow or subscribe to Conversations with B'nai B'rith wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook for more great content. We'll be back soon with more thoughtful conversations on Jewish history, culture, and the issues that matter most to our community. Until then, I'm Dan Mariashin. Thanks for listening, and take care.